Previously, we began a discussion of the book of Job. The problem throughout that Old Testament book is a problem of suffering. How do you reconcile that with the goodness of God? How does the justice of God and the reality of evil coexist? The term is theodicy. How do you deal with that? Job and his friends have difficulty dealing with that. Job actually starts to question things that he's always believed as well as have they. We started really in chapter 4 and noticed some statements that existed from chapter 4 through chapter 7. There are cycles of speeches in this book. Eliphaz, one of those three friends that sit with Job for a full week without saying anything, respond to Job's statements in chapter 3 where he curses the day of his birth. And Eliphaz has an idea that all of them have possessed, that if you suffer any kind of problem, it's because you've done something wrong. Job, you're not innocent, you are guilty. And Job counters that statement or that idea of Eliphaz in his response. On this occasion, I'd like to begin with the second friend that says something. Bildad makes a statement in chapter 8, and Job responds to it in chapters 9 and 10. Bildad makes a statement in chapter 8, how long will you say such things? It's really a criticism of Job. Why would you continue to think that way? The statement is made, or the question asked, verse number 3, does God pervert justice? Does the Almighty pervert what is right? And then he says, when your children sinned against him, he gave them over to the penalty of their sin. The reason your children were killed, they obviously did something wrong. Because if problems actually are found within the lives of those that are righteous, that just perverts justice, and there's no way to justify that in the mind of Bildad and his friends, even in the mind of Job before these problems actually came about. So when your children sinned against him, he gave them over to the penalty of their sin. Again, it's assumption. And Job is asked in that conversation with Eliphaz, okay, if I am guilty, of what am I guilty? And if you're going to maintain that I need to be punished because I've done something wrong, tell me what it is I've done wrong. The same kind of idea really exists here. Bildad argues not from the standpoint of evidence, but from what they have always believed, and that's problematic. And here's the way it's worded, beginning in verse number 8. Ask the former generation and find out what their fathers learned. For we were born only yesterday and know nothing, and our days on earth are but a shadow. Will they not instruct you and tell you? Will they not bring forth words from their understanding? The assumption is the way that people have believed things in the past, that's always going to be correct. Don't question their line of reasoning. If it's invalid, but still don't question it. In fact, they don't see any kind of assumptions that are based upon lack of evidence in the way that they're arguing against the idea that people that are righteous people or people that are good people can suffer. That doesn't make any sense to them whatsoever. So in his response, Job makes a statement. Indeed, I know this is true. He's still questioning those things he's always held to, but the question he raises in verse 1 of chapter 9, how can a mortal be righteous before God? That's the main premise that Eliphaz has suggested. It's something upon which Bildad's thoughts are built. But how does that follow? If no one can be righteous before God, Eliphaz, you can't be righteous before God. Bildad, you can't be righteous before God. And if it is the case that those who are not righteous before God should suffer, you should be suffering along with anybody else and everybody else. The statement is made later on in chapter 9. Job says, although I am blameless, I have no concern for myself. I've come to despise my own life. It's all the same. That's why I say he destroys both the blameless and the wicked. I'm blameless, but I do not understand why this is happening. So in chapter 10, as Job continues to talk, he has a request, verse number 2. I'll say to God, do not condemn me, but tell me what charges you have against me. And then there's reaffirmation in verse 7. You know that I am not guilty, and that no one can rescue me from your hand. I still do not understand this. Then in verse 12, you gave me life and showed me kindness, and in your providence watched over my spirit. And then there's a switch. Verse 14, if I've sinned, you would be watching me and would not let my offense go unpunished. If I'm guilty, woe to me. Even if I'm innocent, I cannot lift my head, for I'm full of shame and I drown in my affliction. It's almost as though he's saying, I can handle the positives in life. There's the things that happen that are negative that I really don't understand. I can't make any sense of them. If I'm trying to live according to the way that you want me to live, but I still suffer, what's the use? The assumptions upon which their view of life, of right and wrong, of justice and mercy and punishment have been based are just that, assumptions. And now when those assumptions are put to the test and start falling apart, they don't know where to turn. Have people really changed today? Do people still have that same kind of conflict going on within them when something bad happens? What have I done wrong? More times than not, it's almost the opposite, where people are thinking, well, everything's going great in my life, so God must really be pleased with my life. And that's just as much an assumption as the false assumptions of Eliphaz and Bildad, and even the way that Job has bought into that wrong way of thinking up to this point in his life. Until now, that thought process is challenged. Tradition, we need to expose the assumptions and traditions. Traditions that are not based upon truth or evidence or fact, but are held to by fancy. Some interesting things in the book of Job. Please stay safe. We'll talk again soon.